I get tired. Jerry, you'll lead the service? Come on up. Good Yontif, everybody. We begin our service on page 138, with speaking to how beautiful the tents of Jacob are with Ma Tovu 138. Top of page 141, 141. I bless the night that nourished my heart to set the ghost of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark, bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me, welcomes the wonder of this day, the field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn quiet loyalty of breath, a tent of thought where I shelter, waves of desire I am sure to, and all the beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live in life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more. We continue on page 150. Please join me, 150, the middle. Some mitzvot sustain us not only in this world, but also in the world to come. They are honoring our parents, acting with kindness and loyalty, eagerly pursuing Jewish learning at all times, welcoming guests, visiting the sick, rejoicing with couples under the chuppah, caring for the dead and mourners, delving deeply into prayer, making peace among human beings, and the study of Torah. This is the cornerstone. We turn to page 158 with Elohai Neshama. We turn to page 160 for our prayers for daily miracles, Nasim B'Kol Yom.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power gave the mind discernment to distinguish light from darkness. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power opens eyes that cannot see. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power brings freedom to the captive. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power spreads the land upon the waters. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power has made all I need. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power gives firmness to our steps. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power removes sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power made me in the image of God. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power endowed me with human freedom. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power has made me Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power gives strength to Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Your great power crowns Israel with glory.
For those who are able, we rise together, Pusiket Zimra, with Baruch She'amar 164.
Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch omer ve'oseh, Baruch koser umkayem, Baruch merachem al ha'aretz, Baruch merachem al ha'aretz, Baruch merachem al ha'briot, Baruch mishalem sachar tov lireyav, Baruch chai la'ad, v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch podeh umatzil, Baruch shemo.
Please be seated. The top of page 167, 167, and please join me. Adonai, my sovereign God, I praise your name. Boundless is your glory, compassionate and full of grace, deeply patient, gentle, and just. Each generation sings of you, forever tells your story. Goodness and mercy extend to all, hands open wide to nourish life. I celebrate your faithful love. Joyful forever we sing to you, and we turn to page 170 for Psalm 150. We continue on page 173.
Hamelech Yoshev al kisei ram b'nisa Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני, לישרים נאווה תהילם. בפי ישרים תתרומם, ובדברי צדיקים תתפרח, ובלשון חסינים תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתהלל. ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, שירו שבחה הלל וזמרה, עוז וממשלה נצח, גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודאות, מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות, אדוני נפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלכי העולמים. יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעלמא תפרח עירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון וביומי חון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, באמרו ויתברך ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי תקודשה. ולילה מן כל ברכתה בשירתה, תושבחתה בנחמתה, תמירן בעלמא, באמרו
For those who are able, we rise together, 178. Leah Godwin will lead us in the reading of Yotser Or, the middle of page 178.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Yotser Or uvarei Hosheh, oseh shalom uvarei et hakol. Praise to you, Adonai our God, whose power fills the cosmos, who opens for us the gates of compassion and lights up the eyes of those who await forgiveness. Shaper of light, source of the darkness, maker of peace, creator of all. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God, it was so. Hameir la'aretz, v'ladarim alecha, b'rachamim uvtuvo mechadesh v'chol yom, tamid ma'aseh b'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita. Mala ha'aretz kinyanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shiva ma'aseh yadecha, v'al moreh or she'asita yefa'arucha selah. In love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, divine artist. All of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. Or Chadash, Al Tzion, Ta'ir, V'nis Ke, Kulanu, Meheira, Le'aro. May you shine a new light on Zion, and may we soon be privileged to share in that light. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotser HaMe'orot. Our praise to you, Adonai, creator of the cosmic lights.
(182).
Haftarah Adonai Eloheinu chemla gedola v'tehra chamalta Batchu b'cha v'telamtei chukei chayim kein techonenu utelamteinu kein techonenu utelamteinu. Lage עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחל לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך בלא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם בעת כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. שם כבוד מלכותו
We turn to page 188 as Jordan Eskenazi leads us in the Haftarah.
Haftarah et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam bam v'shiftecha bevetecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shachvecha uv'kumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha uv'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha leman titzkeru v'asitem et kol mitzotai v'tem kedoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzei tiechem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihyot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem
Elohechem emet.
We continue responsively on top of page 193. Emet vayetziv, true and endearing, all else is fluid, impermanent, fleeting. Unsteady we falter, in chaos we cry, in quest for some certainty, an anchor for trust. Sur chayinu magen yishenu, rock of our lives, our shield and protector. You are the constant, abiding through time. The rock whose works speak of wholeness and justice. You, the still center, fixed point where we stand. From the ends of the earth, from the depths of despair, we call with the psalmist to our fortress and refuge. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, our rock and salvation, our shelter and strength. Grounded in you, we shall never be shaken. The towers of cities will crumble with age, and iron corrodes and decays into rust. But the words and teachings that echo from Sinai are true and endearing. Forever they stand. We turn to page 196, our Song of Freedom, our Michamocha.
Michamocha,
שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו Aleinu Adonai Tzemaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al
The top of page 198, we continue. In the depths of night by the edge of the river, Jacob was left alone, and heartfelt longing in the temple of God, Hannah uttered her prayer alone. In the barren wilderness, in doubt and despair, Elijah found God alone. On the holiest day in the holies of holies, the high priest entered alone. We are bound to one another in myriad ways, but each soul needs time to itself. In solitude, we meet the solitarity of one. Silence makes space for the still, small voice. For the psalmists say, deep calls into deep. From the depths of our soul, we seek what is most profound. For those who are able, we rise together for our tefillah on page 200.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Belohei avoteinu v'imoteinu Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Ve'Elohei Leah Gadol HaGibor VeHaNorah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Bekonei HaKol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומי כעולם לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. Magen Avraham Bezrat Sarah. Amen. Ata gibor leolam Adonai mechayei metim ata. Baal Geburot Umida Melach Melech Meimit Umechayeh Yotser Or l'chaim berachamim v'ne'eman ata l'hachayot metim baruch ata Adonai mechayei hametim.
The top of page 206, we continue. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? I sat in shul for years reading these words before I realized the answer. The answer to each question is me. Who will live and who will die? I will. Who at their end and who not at their end? Me. Like every human being, when I die, it will be at the right time, and it will also be too soon. Fire, water, earthquake, plague. In my lifetime, I've been scorched and drowned, shaken and burdened, wandering and at rest, tranquil and troubled. This has been my life's journey. Of course, I prefer to deflect this truth. I would much prefer to let the prayers talk about someone else, perhaps the fellow in the next row. It has taken a lifetime to reveal that defense as a lie. The prayer is not about someone else, it's about me. It is a frightfully succinct summary of my existence. So now I read it again, but in the first person, and it makes me shiver. I will live and I will die at the right time and before my time. I will wander, but I might yet find rest. I will be troubled, but I may achieve tranquility. This is the central truth of the high, holy days. This is what makes the Mamim Norim days of terror. We are vulnerable. 208. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal, you record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. On the next page, 210.
Umalachim yechafezun mechil urata yochezun ויאמרו הנה יום הדין. לפקוד על צמאמרום בדין, כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין, וכל באי עולם יפרון לפניך כבני מרון. כפרת רועד רו, מעביר צונו תחת שבטו, כן תעביר ותספור, ותמנה, ותפקוד נפש כל חי, בתחתוך קצמה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב אסגזר דינם.
The bottom of page 210. And so a great shofar will cry to Kiyah, a still, small voice will be heard. Angels in a whir of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock, when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments. Top of page 212.
בראש השנה ייכתבון וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. כמה יעברון בכמה ייבראו, מי Mi vekitzo.
We continue the bottom of page 212. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, it's sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wonder? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? Page 214. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. The bottom of page 214. You are everything we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. Page 216. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by. mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere, a glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name. And our name you have linked with yours. We rise together for Kedusha 218.
Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam keshem shemakdishim oto mishemei marom kakatu Avinu Malkeinu ישמיענו ברחמיו.
Please be seated. We continue on page 23230. You chose us with love to be messengers of mitzvot, and through us you made known your aspirations. Among all the many peoples you gave us a pathway to holiness. Among all the great nations you uplifted us and made yourself our sovereign. And so we seek you and serve you and celebrate our nearness to your presence. Your great and sacred name has become our calling. In your love, eternal our God, you have given us this Yom Kippur, a day on which our wrongs are forgiven, a day of sacred assembly, a day to be mindful of our people's going out from Egypt. We turn to page 235. It's not easy to forgive God. It takes huge effort. It is painful, contradictory, and maddening. The human suffering that surrounds us feels utterly unforgivable. But I will forgive God because I do not want to write off the relationship. Because I feel there's too much to be lost by simply walking away. Because I want my children to develop their own relationships and come to their own conclusions. Because despite the pain, sorrow, and suffering, I want my universe full of miracles, not void of them. Because I do not want to be one more angry old cynic in the world. I want to believe a voice still calls out from Sinai, from heaven. That is why I will forgive God. I want to engage in the internal conversations with the ancestors and sages. Despite it all, I want to live my life in praise and awe, and wonder and hope. Even if I am wrong, even if at the end there's nothing but darkness. 238 for Arvitzay.
Adonai Eloheinu be'amcha Yisrael u'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel Tamid avotat Yisrael אל קרוב לכל קוראיו עיני אל עבדך בכוננו שפוך רוחך
Middle of page 244. Our God, divine presence, whose path our ancestors walked, bless us now with words first bestowed on Israel in the time of Moses and Aaron, the threefold blessing given us through Torah that joins our hopes with theirs. May God bless you and protect you, and please join me. May it be so. May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace. May it be so. May God bestow favor upon you and give you peace. May it be so. 246.
Shalom. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה.
Good Yontif. After World War I, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the rabbinical leader in Jerusalem, met with the League of Nations. Europe and Middle East were in total disarray. The diplomats asked him if Eretz Yisrael could absorb large-scale Jewish immigration. At the end of the Great War, Tel Aviv looked like a 19th century Western town, not unlike Tombstone. Most of Israel lacked industry and housing. The land wasn't cultivated, and the defense forces was just in its infancy stages. Rabbi Sonnenfeld answered, "Have you ever heard of a mother say that she has no place for her children? Eretz Yisrael, our mother, will always find a place for her children." It's been nearly 100 years since Rabbi Sonnenfeld addressed the diplomats. And in those 100 years, we have suffered. We were murdered by the Cossacks, slaughtered by the Polish in Pinsk, and attacked by the Russians. We were massacred by the Nazis in Baba Yar and sent to the infernos and to the gas chambers. We were sheep sent to the slaughterhouses. Whether it's been 100 years or 100 past generations, victimhood was a defining feature of our exile and experience. But we never gave up Torah. We never gave up our hope for a better future. We prayed for strength, justice, and peace. And above all, the return to our promised land so that we could be masters of our fate. Rabbi Sonnenfeld believed it, and though mocked and rebuked and challenged by so many Jews of his generation, Theodor Herzl, the father of modern Zionism, said, "A wondrous breed of Jews will spring up from the earth. The Maccabees will rise again. The Jews who will it shall achieve their own state. We shall live at last as free men and women on our own soil, and our own home die peacefully." And after 2,500 years of exile and oppression, we defied the unthinkable and created Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, in 1948. In just 73 years of modern existence, Israel ranks among the world's top countries in innovation, healthcare, business startups, military prowess, education, and something even untangible like happiness, despite surrounded by enemies. And Tel Aviv, the once desolate hill, is now the economic and technological center in the entire Middle East. The Talmud teaches us, whoever sees a place where miracles happen to the Jewish people must say, "Blessed be he who worked wonders for our ancestors in this place." The state of Israel is the greatest miracle for the Jewish people. It's in this land where her citizens are writing the new story of the Jewish people, that after 2,500 years of exile, servitude, ghettos, and death camps, we are here to stay. We are not going anywhere. We will defend our people, and above all, we are not victims anymore. For many of us, our love for Israel won't ever diminish. We visited Israel many times, seen this miracle firsthand. A nation reborn, an ancient language revitalized, a bustling but extremely complicated democracy, and an ancient religious tradition thriving. We supported Israel through federation campaigns and pro-Israel lobbying in D.C. We wanted the next generation to love Israel, sending over 700,000 young Jews for free through the Birthright Foundation to discover their historical roots. But despite our support, Israel is unjustly held to impossibly high standards. No other democracy in the world receives the amount of scrutiny, condemnation, and criticism that Israel faces. The United Nations has passed more resolutions aimed at isolating Israel than resolutions combining warfare, genocide, and human rights violations throughout the rest of the world combined. And here's how to think about this differently. This means that the state of Israel ranks worse in human rights violations than Iran, China, North Korea, Sudan, or Venezuela, where they openly torture, kill, and arrest anyone who doesn't comport to their governments. There's only one reasonable explanation for this: Jew hatred. And perhaps we're thinking, why am I saying Jew hatred and not anti-Semitism? Jew hatred should sting. It should be shock and awe. For too long, academics have been wrestling whether or not that anti-Semitism should be capitalized, or whether or not there should be a hyphen. We don't have time for this. We must call it what it is: Jew hatred. The most famous Torah commentary, Rashi, predicted this 1,000 years ago, writing that when the Jews returned to Israel, the nations would rise up and prevent us from living in our own homeland. Our rabbis understand the high holidays as a 10-day trial. That's why Yom Kippur is also referred to Yom Hadin, the day we stand in judgment. And it's our last day in court before God. Today, on Yom Kippur, I'm offering my court summation to this community. I am not afraid. I want my remarks officially to be on the record about Israel and the Jewish people. As the book of Isaiah instructs us, for the sake of Zion, I will not be silent. For the sake of Jerusalem, I will not be still. But perhaps, let's first talk about the big elephant in the sanctuary and on the webcast. I know we all don't share the same level of support for Israel. Rabbi Grafman's advocacy for Israel caused a major division for this congregation. But he wasn't afraid of the criticism and held firm, because he knew that supporting Israel was not only the morally correct decision, but the only decision because without the state of Israel, the Jewish people would forever be in turmoil. He was an early Zionist when being a Zionist was an unpopular road to be on. Rabbi Graffin believed, as do I, in this core rabbinic teaching. Whatever will happen to the Jewish people will happen to Israel, because this is what we are dealing with. Younger American Jews just don't care about Israel in general. They are intentionally disconnecting because of Israel's presence in Judea and Samaria, the lack of religious pluralism, Netanyahu's governance, and the failure for a two-state solution. So many of them bought into the fictional narrative being taught on college and presented in the media. Israel is the only aggressor. Israel is the Goliath. The Palestinians are the only victims. And therefore, this is causing our relationship with Israel to hemorrhage. To stop the bleeding, many rabbis and Jewish leaders currently use this common remedy, which is unfortunately wrong, to remind American Jews that Israel is a young, imperfect democracy. One prime minister doesn't reflect all the country's values. Israelis, just like Americans, often protest their government regarding domestic and international policies, including advocating for Palestinian rights. Israel is full of complexities. It has both economic and social challenges, and neighboring hostile belligerents that are literally right on their borders. So what do we learn from this remedy? Consider giving Israel a chance. She's young and navigates through uncharted waters. Engage with stakeholders and grassroots organizations on the ground that pursue reforms. Above all, try to hold on to that spiritual connection, because she is the only Jewish state. I think this approach feels reasonable if we're talking about a new noisy neighbor that just moved in, because it's more complicated than stating the ebb and flow of any Western democracy. Because if the high holidays require us to be honest with ourselves, it's time to have a truthful conversation how we treated Israel and ignored the plight of our own people. We've been obsessively self-critical of Israel for years. Prominent Jewish leaders and nonprofits have been deliberately hostile against Israel, issuing press releases and op-eds that lack nuance, facts, and accusing the IDF, Israel's Defense Forces, of a systematic failure of moral judgment. We're not just turning a blind eye to American elected officials and media outlets who espouse Jew hatred and grotesque anti-Israel positions and coverage, but we rationalize our coalitions and viewership when it fits our domestic agenda, which throws Israel under the bus. We are quick to label Israel as a hotbed of religious orthodoxy, but we've been noticeably quiet regarding China's eradication of Uyghur Muslims, the genocide of Nigeria's Christians, or Iran's Pava, the security police who actively hangs gay people, and the thought of re-entering any form of a nuclear deal with them is simply maddening. The Reform movement issued a resolution against Israel's policies in Judea and Samaria, supposed to be overly self-critical about Israel, about our own actions. Isn't this the Jewish way? The late Jewish author Leonard Fein once wrote, "There's a kind of Jew who detests war and violence, who believes that fighting is not the Jewish way, who willingly accepts that Jews have their own higher standards of behavior, and not just that we have them, but those standards are lifeblood, or what we are about, to supervise the rules of engagement, They roof knock in Gaza to avoid indiscriminate killings, when on the other hand, Hamas concurrently launches thousands of rockets into Israel indiscriminately to kill anything, any life. The morality and ethical code in our tradition is something to celebrate. We cherish life, even when it comes to our enemies. But do we use these values to justify our ongoing obsessive critique about Israel? Do we really think that this is the right path for better press coverage, the cessation of UN resolutions and boycotts? Will our overly self-critical mindset alleviate anti-Jewish hostility our children face on the college campus? It appears that the Jewish community holds Israel to a higher standard than we judge ourselves, our children, and our parents. So in essence, we don't hold Israel to an impossibly high standard. We hold Israel to an impossible standard. The path we're on won't inspire young American Jews, and it certainly won't stop the bleeding. The more we single out Israel, the more we hold Israel to unfair and impossible moral standards that no other country in the world faces, we are destroying our right to self-determination and eventually rejecting the miracle in 1948. And even with the warning signs, the rise of the BDS movement, the sharp increase of Jew hatred and violence against Jews on campus and the streets of Europe, the blatant blood libels from prominent news organizations. These two in particular, the murders of Sarah Halimi and Joseph Newman. For those who aren't familiar with Sarah Halimi, she was murdered in Paris for being a Jew. The terrorist that killed her shouted Allahu Akbar many times and then threw her out of a window. The French courts believed that since he was high on marijuana, he could not do any jail time. But consider another situation where someone on cocaine threw a dog out the window and faced 2 years in prison. Joseph Newman, on the other hand, was murdered in Muncie, New York 2 years ago, butchered to death. His attacker will not be held to justice as well. There have been countless attacks against the Hasidic community in New York, which our movement has been utterly too silent. There have been condemnations and investigations from the UN, EU, and the ICC. So we haven't changed as an American Jewish community. We've ignored the signs. We've ignored our people. And then this past May happened. Mahmoud Abbas, who was serving his 16th year of his first term in office of the PLO, canceled the elections because he was polling poorly against Hamas. He took advantage of an ongoing housing dispute in Jerusalem. He provoked young Arabs, instructing them to attack Jews in Jerusalem, put them on social media, and they called this the TikTok Intifada, and then incited Arabs to arm the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. He got his headlines. Israelis were evicting Arabs and storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But Hamas wouldn't let Abbas get the upper hand. In 9 days, they launched 3,500 indiscriminate rockets into Israel, which caused Israel to respond. But in May, it was different this time. The media not only continued their blood libel against Israel's justified response, but they also mainstreamed Jewish hate by giving airtime to Omar Barghouti, the founder of the BDS movement, and other guests who were blatantly hostile to Israel. Universities and nonprofits issued solidarity statements with the Palestinian people and accused Israel of colonialism, white supremacy, and genocide. The chancellor of Rutgers University, Christopher Malloy, first issued a statement condemning Jewish hate. then apologized for the statement because of the pressure mounting from pro-Palestinian student groups. Pro-Palestinian activists vandalized synagogues and physically assaulted Jews in Los Angeles, New York, and known Jewish areas in America and in Europe. The chants were "Death to Jews" and "Free Palestine." At the end of the spring, Jew hatred increased 500% in the US and in England. And pro-Palestinian activism right here in our city, where hundreds gathered downtown screaming from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I spoke about this at length in May and June. Many of us were scared and horrified with the rise of Jew hatred. But the pain didn't stop. We experienced silence from our interfaith partners and allies. We were victims again, screaming for help in Beverly Hills, Times Square, Florida, London, and Paris. But the world saw us as the oppressor. Jewish Birmingham rallied together, showing some promising signs of Israel advocacy, but the same old dilemmas appeared. Young Jews weren't in the pews and at the rallies, nor were they interested in joining our newly formed Israel Action Committee. The influence of the 24-hour news cycle lured us away from the plight of our people. The summer arrived. We went to the lake. We went to the beach. And when I spoke about ongoing issues about Israel, Jewish hate, the threat from Iran, congregants asked me to respect the sanctity of Shabbat. So this is precisely why I'm going on the record. I am a Jew. I am a Zionist. I'm committed to every Jew, period. Here on Highland Avenue, on Overton Road, regardless of movement. Without a safe and secure Israel, without the celebration of the miracle in 1948, Judaism and the Jewish people will greatly suffer. I'm going on the record because I won't allow this to happen. In our high holiday liturgy, we publicly confess that we've easily forgotten Zion. It's not only our time to remember, but time to change the current course. So many of you ask me, what's the plan moving forward? We must commit to sending our teens and young adults to Israel annually. We must encourage gap years in Israel and strong attendance in Jewish summer camp. Evidence-based studies tell us that travel to Israel and summer camp significantly strengthens Jewish identity. And I want to talk to every parent right now who has kids in sports. I love playing sports. I was a 4-year letterman in college. More than likely, we're not going to go pro. Take that time away from all those activities and sports. Send them to Jewish summer camp. Send them to Israel. This is what evidence tells us. And I promise you, scoring that goal will feel good. But seeing the history of our people in the foothills of Judea and Samaria where the Maccabees fought will have a lasting memory. We also need to stop being obsessively critical about Israel and holding Israel to a double standard that no other country in the world faces. I promise you that Israel isn't perfect and will continue to make mistakes, but like every Western democracy, I have no doubt there'll be future coalitions we absolutely hate. But holding Israel to this impossible standard only undermines it and threatens Jews worldwide. And here's a hard one. It's time to hold our partners and allies accountable. If they delegitimize, demonize, and subject Israel to double standards, and have allyship or partnerships with known Jew haters and anti-Israel activists. And this is going to require us, from looking at their funders, seeing who else they partner with or intersection with. I know this is going to be hard because we care about issues in this country. We spent years building relationships with nonprofits and faith groups that help support many common causes. I certainly empathize. I know that there are so many members of this congregation who are active in domestic matters, which is a celebration of the democratic process. The lesson moving forward is, don't ever give up the fight for justice. But we need to build coalitions with organizations that support us too. People who will show up for us the same way that we show up for them, where we don't need to call on them first, and where I don't have to stand here and speak to our congregation when our interfaith partners have been silent. We also can't underestimate the significance of grassroots advocacy. Lobbying local government is a powerful method to effect change. Our friend Ed Fields, a chief strategist in the mayor's office, spoke at the JCRC's rally against Jew hate here at Temple Emanu-El in late June. I publicly asked Ed for the city of Birmingham to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which would send a major statement for the city of Birmingham for its support for the Jewish people and Israel. I followed up a week later. He texted back, could we kindly hold off until after the election? I agreed. Mayor Woodfin was just elected to his second term. It's time for all of us to call the mayor and get this done. If a media outlet or publication is erroneously hostile to Israel, where its reporting is full of lies which in effect causes any harm to the Jewish people as demonstrated this past spring, turn the channel and cancel our subscriptions. This may be controversial, but we need to ask it. Here's a question the American Jewish community needs to answer. Can any publication be called a paper of record when its history includes burying the Holocaust, actively lying about Israel, and is openly aggressive to Jewish employees that has caused resignations? Synagogues must make Israel education a top priority for our children and adults. And I'm so proud that Linda Gutchin in our Southgate program has engaged the iCenter in Chicago for them to learn about Israel. And in our incredible community Kesher program, our teens will learn how to respond to false accusations against Israel. And here's an example. When Israel is called an apartheid state, our students, our adults, need to know how to respond. Israel is not an apartheid state because the overwhelming majority of our citizens are Jews. Arab Israelis are minorities with full legal rights who are employed in any sector, high sectors, and positions in Israel. I also want to say this. Let's look at the facts regarding the word Palestine. The Greek historian Herodotus used the Greek word for Palestine to refer to Judea in the 5th century BCE. And it was the Romans who renamed Judea to Syria Palestinia as punishment because of the rebellion in 135 CE. This is a fact. Jews are indigenous to Judea. Arabs are indigenous to Arabia. Historical Palestine is the history of the Jewish people in Judea. And finally, I've had many students participate in the March of Living, a program that brings Jewish teens to Poland to learn about the Holocaust. They walk around Auschwitz draped in an Israeli flag, and I wasn't a fan of this image because the creation of the state of Israel did not happen because of the Holocaust. This was hard work, a movement that started in the late 19th century. But sometimes we need to be open-minded. So I learned to love this message because it reinforces our new story. We are here to stay. We are not going anywhere. We will defend our people. We are not victims anymore. This is because of Israel, the greatest miracle for the Jewish people. And this must be our mindset moving forward, because I don't want our people to suffer, to be in exile and wander. I don't want our people to be oppressed. We must be in control of our own fate. As much as Rashi may have correctly predicted that the nations wouldn't allow Jews to have sovereignty in our homeland, but I won't allow them to succeed, and we can't allow it. That's why I'm not afraid to say all this, and that's why I am on the record, and this is why we must be on the record too. So this is the new year where we love Israel unconditionally, support her loudly and proudly, and stop holding her to any impossible standard. This is our plan because we must do this for every college student who is assaulted for being Jewish. We must do this for every Jew in any synagogue and on any street. We must do this to find some justice for Sarah Halimi and Joseph Newman, and any Jew throughout our history that was murdered for being Jewish. We must do this for the next generation. As Rabbi Sonnenfeld said, have you ever heard of a mother say she has no place for her children? Eretz Yisrael, our mother, will always find a place for her children. And we will always hold Israel as a sacred and indigenous homeland of every single Jew, because Israel is everything. I repeat, Israel is everything to us, to the Jewish people, and to Judaism. This is my summation, and I rest my case. We turn to page 252, and for those who are able, we rise together. Avinu Malkeinu, please join me, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings. Avinu Malkeinu, let our eyes behold the dawn of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu, we pray, do not turn us away from you with nothing. Avinu Malkeinu, welcome our prayer with love, accept and embrace it. Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name. Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake, if not for ours. Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are sovereign. Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, hear a voice, trust us with tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol aleinu, Me'alol aleinu, Metapeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kotmeinu, Mesefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu. Please sing with us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Donenu v'Amenu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'Amenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'Amenu, ki ein banu masim.
Remain standing for Seder Kriyat Torah 255.
Ein כמוך באלוהים אדוני. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom.
wasn't the Torah. First, our new champion, our ball carrier, Jose Katz, will be leading us in our Torah reading, which is Parshat Nitzavim, I believe 266. We're so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Jose. Okay, Tanner.
For our first aliyah, we invite Mark and Lynn Cohen.
good.
Ya'amdu l'aliyah la-Torah.
Okay. Then it's a beam.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Amorach Leolam Voed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Voed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'Nasan Lanu Es Toraso. Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen. אתם ניצבים היום כולכם לפני אדוני אלוהיכם, ראשיכם, שבטיכם, זיתיכם ושוטריכם, כל איש ישראל. תפס נשיכם וגרך אשר בקרב מחניך, מחטף עציך שב ממך, לעברך בבריאת אדוני אלוהיך, ובעלתו אשר אדוני אלוהיך כורת עמך היום.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'Chayei Olam Notah B'Tzochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen. For our second aliyah, we invite up Amy Chauvin. Ta'amol aliyah la Torah.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. למען הקיים איתך היום לא לעם, והוא יהיה לך לאלוהים, כאשר דיבר לך, וכאשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, ולא אתכם לבדכם, אנחנו כורת את הברית הזאת, ואת האלה הזאת, כי עת אשר ישנו פה עמנו עמת היום, לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר איננו פה עמנו היום.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten HaTorah.
Amen. For our third aliyah, we invite Russ, Jan, and Callie Blitz. Ya'amdu l'aliyah la Torah.
Good. You would? Okay. If you are not good, good.
Hey guys, come on in. One day mishpacha.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. והיה כי יבוא עליך כל הדברים האלה, הברכה והקללה, אשר נתתי לפניך, והשבת אל לבביך בכל הגויים, אשר אדיחך אדוני אלוהיך, שמה ושבת עד אדוני אלוהיך, ושמד בקולו, ככל אשר אנחנו מצווך היום, אתה ובניך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך, ושב אדוני אלוהיך את שבותך ורחמך, ושם וקובצך מכל העמים, אשר חפיצך אדוני אלוהיך שמה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'yeh olam nata b'tohenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Yasher koach. For our fourth Aliyah, we invite up Jack Schnipper. Ya'amod Yaakov ben Chaim la'aliyah laTorah.
Baruch es Adonai Baruch.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Baruch Adonai HaBaruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, V'nasan Lanu Es Torah. So Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
אמן. אם יהיה נידחיך בקצה השמיים משם, יקבצך אדוני אלוהיך, ומשם ייקחך, ויביאך אדוני אלוהיך אל הארץ, אשר ירשו אבותיך, וירשת ויתבך, וירבך מאבותיך, ומל אדוני אלוהיך את לבבך ואת לבב זרעך, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך, למען חייך.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Nasan Lanu Torah Emes, V'chayei Olam Tata B'Sochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach. For our fifth and final Aliyah, we invite up Donald and Ronnie Hess. Ya'amdu la'aliyah laTorah.
Baruch hu Adonai HaBaruch.
Baruch Adonai HaBaruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBaruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
ונתן אדוני אלוהיך את כל האלה על אויביך ועל שנאיך, אשר רדפוך, ואתה תשוב, ושמעת בקול אדוני, ועשית את כל מצוותיו, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, והותירך אדוני אלוהיך בכל מעשה ידיך, בפרי בטנך, ובפרי בהמתך, ובפרי אדמתך, לטובה, כי ישוב אדוני לסוס עליך, לטוב כאשר שש על אבותיך, כי תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך, לשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו, הכתובה בספר התורה זה, כי תשוב אל אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten Torah.
Amen. Yasher Koach.
Thank you so much. As the Torah is within our presence, we take time to think of those in our community who are in need of strength and healing. On this Yontif, we think of Linda Applebaum, Sydney Silverman Bailey, Margaret Bell, Harold Seitlin, Deborah Chargois, Karen Edwards, Emmeline Fries, Ruth Graffin Fromstein, Edward Goldberg, Barbara Goldstone, Elaine Gross, Josie Hatfeld, Evelyn Held, Donald and Maida Himmel, Norma Jill Jacobson, Corey Kessler, Laney Klein, Bart Colber, Jerry Lapidus, Wayne Lewis, Jeffrey Muss, Liz Slive, Chrissy St. Charles, David Siegel, Brenda Weinstein, Jesse Weisberg, and Elisa Rosemore Whitehead. For those with us this morning, if you're thinking of a loved one or friend and wish to share a name out loud, we invite you to do so as my eyes meet yours. For those names mentioned out loud and for those names that are still in our hearts, we continue with our Misha Berach, our prayer for healing.
Misha Berach Avoteinu, Avraham, Yitzchak veYaakov. Shemerach imoteinu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer. Hear our prayer, and bless us as well.
For the honor of lifting the Torah, we welcome Matthew Levin, a right arm stronger than Bryce Young, who's here to lift it. We rise together.
blessing before our Haftarah, we invite up Benji Sokol, and we invite up also Billy Marsala to read our Haftarah portion.
Come on, Wojciech. Get up there, Matt.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar bin ve'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo Yisrael amo uvinviei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen. Yasher koach.
Next year you'll do the entire service. Here, you got the big dog.
Great, thank you.
Page 277.
The fast I desire. Cry from the depths, said God. Do not hold back. Lift your voice like the shofar. Tell my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob their sin. Yes, they seek me daily, as though eager to learn my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not abandoned God's law. They ask of me the right way, eager for God's nearness. They say, why do we fast, and why do you not see it? We afflict ourselves, and you do not know it. Because even on your fast day you think only of desire, while oppressing all who work for you. Because your fasting is filled with strife, and with callous fists you strike. No, your fasting this day will not lift up your voice before heaven. Is this the fast I desire? A day to afflict body and soul, bowing your head like a reed, covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes? Do you call this a fast, a day worthy of the favor of Adonai? Is not this the fast I desire? To break the bond of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free and release all those enslaved. It is not to share your bread with the hungry and to take the homeless poor into your home and never neglect your own flesh and blood. Then shall your light burst free like the dawn, and your wounds shall heal quickly. The righteous one leading the way before you, the presence of Adonai guarding you from behind. Then when you call, Adonai will answer, and when you cry, will respond, I am here. If you remove the chains of oppression, the menacing hand, the menacing word, if you offer your compassion to the hungry and satisfy the suffering, then shall your light shine through the darkness, and your night become bright as noon. Adonai will guide you always. Slack your thirst in parched places, give you strength to your bones. You shall be like a well-watered garden, an unfailing spring. From you they will rebuild ancient ruins, lay foundations for ages to come, and you shall be called the one who mends the breach and brings back the streets for dwelling. If you cease to trample Shabbat, stop pursuing your affairs on my holy day, if you call Shabbat a delight, the holy day of Adonai honored, and if you guard God not by doing business or speaking of everyday matters, then shall you take pure delight in Adonai. I will lift up your journey on earth to the highest of places and nourish you from the heritage of your father Jacob. For thus spoke Adonai.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ועוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
We turn to page 290 as we rise as we put the Torah back to the ark.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו.
Remain standing at the top of page 292, and please join me. We stand in humility, conscious of our failings. Shema Kolenu Adonai, hear our call. True sacrifice to God is a penitent spirit. You treasure a crushed and repentant heart. For you are close to the brokenhearted, and you give strength to a suffering soul. You are the healer of shattered hearts. You are the one who binds up their wounds. For thus says the high and exalted one, who lives forever, whose name is holy. I dwell in high and holy place, but also with the downcast and lowly, to bring new life to despondent souls, to restore and revive repentant hearts. Return now, Israel, to Adonai, your God, for you have fallen because of your sin. Take the words with you and return to God. Ask the Eternal, forgive what is wrong, accept what is good. We stand in humility, conscious of our failings. We set before you the wrongs we have done. We trust in your compassion, for you know who we are. Shema Kolenu, Adonai, hear our call. 294, and please be seated.
Hashivenu Adonai Elecha, Hashivenu Elecha v'nashuva, Chatesh Yameinu, Yameinu, Kekedem.
The top of page 295. Even rocks crack, I tell you, and not on account of age. For years they lie on their backs in the cold and the heat. So many years it almost creates the impression of calm. They don't move so the cracks can hide. A kind of pride, years pass over them as they wait. Whoever is going to shatter them hasn't come yet. And so the moss flourishes, the seaweed is cast about. The sea bursts out and it slides back, and it seems the rocks are perfectly still. Till a little seal comes to rub against them, comes and goes. And suddenly the stone has an open wound. I told you when rocks crack, it happens by surprise. Not to mention people. 296. Middle of page 296. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong, and we rise together.
Ashamnu, Agatnu, Gazalnu, Tibarnu Tofi, Evinu, Irshanu, Satnu, Hamasnu, Tafalnu Shaker, Ya'atznu Ram,
read the bottom together, page 296. Of these wrongs we are guilty. We betray, we steal, we scorn. We act perversely. We are cruel, we scheme, we are violent. We slander, we devise evil. We lie. We ridicule, we disobey. We abuse, we defy. We corrupt, we commit crimes. We are hostile, we are stubborn. We are immoral, we kill, we spoil. We go astray, we lead others astray. We turn to page 299, and again we read together. For the sin we have committed against you through evading and avoiding, because we could not face the truth. For flight into hypocrisy and deception, because we do not dare to speak it. For the facts we disassembled, and for all the gloss over, for the excuses we made. For feeding our bodies and starving our souls, for interfering with the souls of others and neglecting their needs, for shifting our responsibilities, for reproaches and recriminations, for our foolishness, our folly and false standards, for seeing these things only in others, never in ourselves, for our complacency which blinds us, and our self-righteousness which lessens us, for calculating kindness and measuring out pity, for charity that is cold and prayers without feeling, for withholding our love, for the appeals that we ignored and for the people whom we refused, for the affliction which died and our lives that became bitter, for the visions which faded, the ideals we neglected, and the opportunities we lost, for the fear of change and renewal and our unbelief, for saying prayers aloud but refusing to listen, for being our own worst enemy. We continue on page 310 with Ki Anu Amecha. Virtually with an incredible breakout session. Then back here at 3 p.m. for a Yom Kippur afternoon service. At 4 o'clock, a brief healing service, and then 4:30 Yiskor concluding, and then we break bread. Good Yontif.
Yontif.
He's just, I don't know. She'll get there before us.